Greetings collectors and welcome to today's retro game review. Get ready for the defining gaming moment of the century, the greatest game of all time, the next generation of gaming. Or not, as today we take a look at Rise of the Robots. There are defining moments in your life that you remember when you're looking forward to a new movie or a new game. A game that the marketers tell you that is the real deal, the next evolution in gaming. Then, when that game hits the shelves, it falls down so short it makes you question everything you thought you knew about games' evolution. In the 90s, Rise of the Robots was perhaps the shining example of over-promising on a game's release. The game was to feature pre-rendered sprites, cutting-edge gameplay, and even a soundtrack by Queen's Brian May. On paper, this robot rumble was to be the ringside event of the decade. Just what went wrong? Upon release, the game was universally panned by critics and gamers alike. Most of you will know the history, but essentially it was a case of style over substance. In truth, only one of Brian May's tracks made it into the game, and the much talked up AI never really manifested itself. In its defence, I have to say that Rise of the Robots isn't the worst game I've ever played, not by a long way. Don't get me wrong, the game is bad. It's just that the crappiness was massively amplified under the spotlight the marketers created for it. In truth, if you had never been exposed to the hype engine surrounding this game at the time, you would simply have just passed this one by, rather than crossing the road to stare at it and poke it with a stick just to check if it was still breathing. Rise of the Robots actually starts quite promisingly, with a futuristic animation of a world dominated by robots. It is a little low in frames per second, and the music is quite brash, but there's nothing terrible to report here. Then you realise that you'll be fighting a forklift truck. Well, okay, I suppose that's alright. After all, it's not the weirdest thing that I've fought in a game. Looking from afar, the graphics also aren't that bad. The static background of an empty warehouse is a little underwhelming. It would have been nice if the designers had added at least some animation to the backgrounds. It's the characters themselves though. The player Cyborg looks decent enough, but the moveset is absolutely woeful. He controls like a slow-moving tank, and your only real options are to punch or kick. Even back in the days of the original Double Dragon, we had progressed further than this. As for the opponents, well, it's a forklift truck. It can extend a mechanical arm, and that's about it. The whole setup really doesn't allow for a fluid fighting system. As for the ape-type robot, well, he'll just sit there and take it all day long. Not only is the moveset limited, but the actual programming is flawed. Simply crouch and the opponent won't really fight back. It really is just exploit after exploit with this game to drag yourself to the end. Mediocre movesets are one thing, but if the opponent isn't programmed to fight back, or is programmed so that its attack patterns and responses are so transparent, then really this game is a non-starter. In truth, the game looks okay. Not great, but okay. It's all about the gameplay when it comes to the failure of this game, in my opinion. Imagine having to work on this game knowing that people would be buying a half-baked product. This was certainly one of the low points of the 16-bit era. The footage I'm showing here is of the Sega Mega Drive version, although many platforms of the day did see a release. Interestingly, each version was also bad, but bad in slightly different ways. The Mega Drive and Genesis versions stand out for me though as the worst of the lot. Whereas the PC version and even the 3DO versions can redeem themselves a little bit with an enhanced graphics set, the Mega Drive and Super Nintendo versions can't even offer this. If you are looking to pick up a physical copy of the game, here is the UK Sega Mega Drive edition. Look for a mint box with manual and cartridge. Here in the UK the game is incredibly common, so you shouldn't have any issues tracking down a copy. In terms of pricing, don't expect to pay much for this one. The poor reviews but large print run means there are plenty of copies to go round. That's in all markets, all consoles. Would I recommend Rise of the Robots? Absolutely not. Other than for academic reasons, this is a game that needs to stay in the past. Rise of the Robots did unbelievably spawn a sequel in 1996, Rise 2: Resurrection. How is a question to this day that I still can't fully fathom. After the PR nightmare of the first game, I don't think anyone saw the sequel on the cards. In truth, the launch of the sequel was far quieter and very few gamers held any interest in it. It is better than the original, but very much still mediocre. If you must insist on playing as a cyborg or robot, I can suggest either Cyrax or Sector in Mortal Kombat 3. There is far more to the Rise of the Robots story on how it went from being a game changer on paper to the rather poor implementation in practice. For those really interested, I'll let you dig deeper. The internet is full of interviews and backstory. For those that were around collecting in the 90s, most will remember Rise of the Robots as one of the most hyped games ever, and one of the largest disappointments ever to hit our consoles. Personally, I am happy to have this game in my collection. It's a reminder that not all technology turns out the way we want, despite the best endeavours of their creators. Ironically, technology not turning out as the way we would wish may one day allow the real world Rise of the Robots. Hello again, I hope you enjoyed today's show and thank you for the view. Remember, you can always comment, like, subscribe and find us on the social media sites below. Happy collecting!